What
Yeah.
so you got this week off. Then they've got
Yep.
the 6 and a bit weeks leading into London. What does that look like? Sort of turning it around on such short notice. I noticed Brett came out and ran the Australian record after a fairly short
Yep.
turnaround, which was amazing to me. It seems like something that's sort of happening more now than it ever did, even sort of 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, that's another great one. Question that is. I think yeah, Brett was able to run 209 at London, and then 8 weeks later, or maybe 9 weeks later, it wasn't 10. I think it was 8 or 9. He ran 207.31, was it, and broke the Australian record at Fukuoka. I think I think the super shoes play a pretty big role in the recovery from these events. Uh, I think that's. I mean, everyone would agree that do a marathon in the old school flats, and then do a marathon in the Vaporflies or the Alpha Flies or the Adios Pro 3s, and it's a very different recovery process. My first race, my first marathon I did in the Nike Streaks. You'd probably remember them. No carbon plate, no Zoom foam, nothing, just a dead flat shoe. And I reckon it took me probably about 2.5 weeks to make for me to feel like I was recovered. Now in these Alpha Flies, honestly, it's crazy to say. I mean, I'm 4 days post marathon. I feel fully recovered at this point, and that's been mostly the
Wow.
same for the previous few marathons, 4 or 5 days. Now that's not true. I'm not fully recovered, but at least my muscles are giving me that indication that I am. There's probably still some neural and general fatigue that lingers a little bit more. Um, but I do think backing up is possible for that reason. But also, I do think backing up is easier and more doable if you're a runner that's had a lot more or that's had more lifetime mileage. I think lifetime mileage is a thing that's not spoken about that much, but I think it's actually a pretty big deal. Is that when you have more years and more volume of running in your legs, it appears to me like this means you might get injured more easily, potentially, but you also have the ability to recover faster and also just simply do, yeah, more training in general. That's what it appears to me because I've got quite a few friends that have been running, that are around our age, that have been running since they were 17, 18, 19. They seem to be able to back up pretty well from marathons and do another marathon shortly after. Whereas people that I coach that are new to running have tried it, and the success rate doesn't seem as high. They just need more time to recover from each marathon. So after the experiment with having 5 weeks totally off and then running a 220 14 weeks later, that really flipped a switch in my mind to be like, okay, well, total rest is is okay. Total
Yeah.
rest and total time off is fine. It just has to be done at the right times. And given I just did a huge training block and I was well, I ran 221. Whether I was in better shape or not is an argument for people that can they want to debate that. And I say that because obviously I struggled with the cramping towards the end. But I think taking a full week off, I will basically not really lose anything at all, fitness wise, especially given the 221 race itself is such a big training effort. That is basically a 2 hour 21 threshold run. So I'm going to take that forward with me as well. But having 7 days off and then a 6 week training block, I should start that 6 week training block in 220 ish shape, give or take a few minutes. And yeah, my training sort of philosophy, I've been coaching myself. It's pretty simple. Two harder workouts a week. One being in a long run on the weekend, and the other one being midweek. Yeah, and the midweek sessions normally at sort of 5K, 10K, half marathon effort around that threshold or a little bit quicker VO2 max. And the long run tends to be between 32 and 42K with sometimes it'll be with some marathon effort work in there. Sometimes it won't. It'll depend a little bit on the week and what's going on in the week and how far I am out from the race. But yeah, I think the 6 week block will serve well. I know a lot of examples of people that have done a big training block, raced okay or poorly, had a short break, done a short training block, and then run really well. And the belief is maybe that the first training block, maybe you were potentially overtraining a little bit, or maybe you just didn't quite nail the first one. You needed a little bit of rest to completely absorb all of the training in the first block, and then oftentimes the short second block is just the way to sort of top up on the fitness a little bit, but go in on maybe a little bit fresher into the second race.
Mhm.
I haven't ever really looked at Brett's Strava to know what he did between those two races, but I'd be curious to know if he took any rest after the first one or not. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see if I'm able to back up well or not. I'm pretty confident in being able to do so. I think the older I get, the more I'm realizing that listening to the body is the number one thing by far to gauge your training. I could easily go and set this perfect training plan from now leading into London, but if I try and do an interval session this Monday and I feel really tired still, there's no point in following that plan anymore. I have to pull back and reassess and readjust and go, nope, I wasn't ready for that. I have to push that workout back another 5 days or whatever it ends up being. So yeah, it's super, super important to pay attention to the fatigue and energy and just listen to the body and